Ever pondered how your brain governs your emotions and actions? This 3-pound mass of gray and white matter sitting at the center of all human activity, you could call it the command center of your life, is responsible for everything you think, feel, and do. Let's dive into the brain's role as the control center of the body. It commands our thoughts, emotions, and actions. It's the pilot of our bodies and the interpreter of our world. It's like the most sophisticated supercomputer ever built, but instead of silicon and metal, it's made of cells and proteins. The brain is a complex organ with different areas responsible for different functions. For instance, the prefrontal cortex, situated right behind your forehead, is the CEO of your brain. It's responsible for executive functions like decision-making, problem-solving, and self-control. It's the rational part of the brain that thinks things through and makes sound decisions. Then there's the amygdala, 2 almond-shaped clusters of cells deep within the brain. This is where your emotions live. The amygdala is the emotional command center, processing responses to events that make us feel. It's the part of the brain that springs into action when you're scared, excited, or angry. And let's not forget the limbic system, a complex set of structures that lies on both sides of the thalamus, right under the cerebrum. It's not just one part of the brain, but a whole system that deals with emotions and memory. This is where your brain processes feelings, and it's also where long-term memories are stored. But how does the brain control our emotions? The answer lies in neurotransmitters, the brain's chemical messengers. They transmit signals from one neuron to another, influencing our mood, appetite, and sleep, among other things. They're like the brain's communication system, ensuring that everything runs smoothly and efficiently. So it's clear that our brain has a great deal of power over us, but how does this process work? Well, stick around as we delve deeper into the fascinating world of the human brain. Have you ever felt a sudden rush of fear during a scary movie, or joy when seeing a loved one? That's your amygdala at work. Our brains are intricate networks of neurons, and nestled deep within this network is a small almond-shaped region known as the amygdala. This little powerhouse is the emotional command center of our brains, and it plays a critical role in processing our emotions. Picture the amygdala as a vigilant sentinel, always on the lookout. It scans our environment for potential threats and rewards, prepares us to act accordingly, and then sends this emotional information to other parts of the brain for further processing. When the amygdala senses something in our environment that could potentially harm us, it triggers the release of stress hormones, causing our heart rate to increase and our muscles to tense up. This is the classic fight or flight response. On the other hand, when it perceives something pleasant, such as a delicious meal or a friendly face, it helps us feel calm and contented. But it's not just about reacting to the present moment. The amygdala also stores emotional memories. It remembers the fear you felt when you saw a scary movie, or the joy you experienced when you saw a loved one. And these emotional memories can influence our future behaviors. For instance, if you've ever been bitten by a dog, your amygdala will store that memory and trigger a fear response whenever you see a dog, even if it's just a harmless puppy. However, the amygdala doesn't work alone. It's tightly connected to other parts of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex, which helps us think before we act. This connection is crucial because it allows us to respond to emotional information in a more thoughtful and controlled way rather than just reacting impulsively. So the next time you feel a surge of emotion, remember, it's your amygdala, pulling the strings, guiding your responses, and influencing your behavior. Now that we've understood the amygdala, let's look at another critical part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. When you resist that tempting slice of cake or decide to go for a run instead of lounging on the couch, you're using your prefrontal cortex. This region of the brain, tucked away at the front, is our very own command center for decision-making and self-control. Think about it as the CEO of a major corporation, overseeing and making the tough calls. It's the prefrontal cortex that steps in when you're on the brink of making an impulsive decision. It helps you pause, evaluate the situation, and choose a course of action that aligns with your long-term goals and values. The prefrontal cortex also plays a crucial role in managing our emotions. As humans, we are emotional beings. We feel joy, sadness, anger, fear, and a whole spectrum of other emotions. But how we respond to these emotions, that's where our prefrontal cortex comes into play. It helps us regulate our emotional reactions so we don't get swept away by our feelings. Let's consider a scenario. You're stuck in traffic and someone cuts you off. Your immediate reaction might be anger, maybe even a desire to retaliate. But then your prefrontal cortex steps in. It reminds you of the potential consequences. A traffic accident, a reckless driving ticket. Suddenly, honking your horn or tailgating doesn't seem like the best idea. On a more scientific level, the prefrontal cortex helps us manage our emotions by controlling the release of chemicals in our body. When we're stressed, our body releases cortisol. But with the help of the prefrontal cortex, we can engage in activities that reduce cortisol levels, like deep breathing or meditation. So while the prefrontal cortex might not be as famous as the amygdala or the hippocampus, its role in our lives is undeniably important. It's like the unsung hero of our brain, constantly working behind the scenes to ensure we make rational decisions and manage our emotions effectively. So while the amygdala pushes us to act on our emotions, the prefrontal cortex helps us think before we act. But how do these parts of the brain communicate? Neurotransmitters are the brain's messengers, transmitting information from one part of the brain to another. Just like how a mailman delivers your letters, these biochemical couriers carry important messages throughout the vast network of neurons that make up the brain. Let's talk about three key neurotransmitters: dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Each one plays a unique role in regulating our emotions and actions, acting as a sort of chemical language for the brain. First up is dopamine. Think of dopamine as the brain's reward system. It's released when we do something enjoyable, like eating a delicious meal or scoring a goal in a soccer match. This creates a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction and motivates us to repeat these actions. But when dopamine levels are too high or too low, it can lead to issues such as addiction or depression. Next is serotonin. Serotonin is often called the feel-good neurotransmitter because it contributes to our overall sense of well-being and happiness. It also helps regulate our sleep and appetite. But like all things in life, balance is key. Too much or too little serotonin can lead to mood disorders like anxiety and depression. Finally, we have norepinephrine. This neurotransmitter is involved in our body's stress response. When we're in a high-stress situation, norepinephrine is released, increasing our heart rate and alertness. It's like the body's natural caffeine. But just like how too much caffeine can make us jittery, an imbalance of norepinephrine can lead to anxiety disorders. So, you see, our emotions and actions are not just a result of our conscious thoughts and decisions. They're also significantly influenced by these tiny chemical messengers zipping around in our brains. When these neurotransmitters are in balance, we function at our best. But when they're out of whack, it can lead to mental health issues. So, neurotransmitters are the crucial link in the brain's control over our emotions and actions. They are the unsung heroes, silently shaping our experiences and perceptions. So we've learned about the different parts of the brain involved in controlling our emotions and actions, and the role of neurotransmitters. But how does it all fit together? Let's venture back to the beginning. Our emotions and actions are not simply whims we choose to follow. They're complex physiological responses controlled by our brain. The prefrontal cortex, our brain's CEO, if you will, plays a vital role in this process. It's the mastermind behind our decision-making and impulse control. It's our brain's Jiminy Cricket, whispering words of caution when we're about to make a hasty decision. But it's not an all-powerful dictator. It has a volatile partner in crime, the amygdala. This little almond-shaped structure is the birthplace of our emotions. It's quick to react, especially to threats, and it's not always logical. It's the one who sounds the alarm, often before the prefrontal cortex has had a chance to weigh in. Now, these two have a complex relationship. The amygdala is quick to act, while the prefrontal cortex is more deliberate. This can lead to conflicts, especially when we're under stress. But it's not a hopeless situation. By understanding how these two structures interact, we can start to influence their conversation. And here's where neurotransmitters come into play. These chemical messengers act as the go-between, carrying messages from one part of the brain to another. Serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine each play a unique role in modulating our emotions and behaviors. They're like the diplomatic envoys, ensuring the lines of communication remain open. Understanding this intricate dance can help us manage our emotions and behaviors better. It's a reminder that we're not at the mercy of our emotions. With insight and practice, we can learn to influence these internal conversations, to encourage our prefrontal cortex to take the reins more often, and to quiet the alarm bells of our amygdala. And there you have it, a glimpse into the fascinating world of our brain and its control over our emotions and actions.